Mohammed?
sida aad ku daawanayseen videogaas waxa uu hordhac u ahaa sida dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya iyo saameynta xanuunka Covid uu ku yeeshay sanadkan qiimayntiisa labada saac soo socota waxaanu eegi doonaa inagoo markaa aanu ku gorfaan doono barnaamijka kobaca dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya iyo isbeddelkiisa iyo xaaladda xanuunka Covid-19 waxaan ugu soo biiri doonaa oo barnaamijka nagala qayb qaadan doona wasiirka maaliyadda xukuumadda Soomaaliya Dr. Bayle Cabdiraxmaan Bayle iyo waliba madaxa hagaha dalka Soomaaliya ee bangiga adduunka oo isla markaa barnaamijka ka qayb galay doona waa Christina Sefson iyadoo sidoo kalena ay nagala qayb qaadan doonaan barnaamijka dadweynaha waxa su'aalihiina iyo inta barnaamijku uu socdo aragtidaada qabtaan aad ku soo diri kartaan idigu noo soo qorayana aad noogu soo gudbin kartaan baraha bulshada aanu ku leenahay sida goobjoog TV waa Twitterka @goobjoog.tv sidoo kale waxaad nagala socon kartaan oo aad barnaamijka kala socon doontaan barta Twitterka ee bangiga adduunka ee isna markaa lagu magacaabo MBVF1 Somalia idinkoo su'aalihiina halkaasi ku soo qori kara oo soo gudbin kara bangiga adduunka ayaa waxa uu qaaday inuu markaa isku holo warbixin uu ka sameeyay dhaqaalaha adduunka iyadoo sidoo kalena saameynta uu ku yeeshay xagga caafimaad ahaan xanuunka Covid-19 sanadkan 2020 waxaana lagu qiimeeyay inuu soo dhac weyn xagga dhaqaalaha uu ku yimid dunida marka la fiiriyo Soomaaliya qayb ay ka tahay si gaar ah natiijada lagu qiimeeyay dhaqaalaha dunida ayaa waxa la sheegay inuu soo dhac weyn ku yimid marka qiyaas laga qaato bishii January ee sanadka 2020 iyo xilligan aanu joogno ee gabagabada sanadka iyadoo soo dhac weyn uu ku yimid kobaca dhaqaalaha oo la leeyahay waxa markaa gundhig u ah xagga dhaqaalaha saameynta uu ku yeeshay xanuunka Covid-19 caafimaad ahaan oo dunida oo dhan uu qalqal galiyay dalalka ka horeeya saxaraha Afrikana waxay wajahayaan qatarta ugu weyneed 25 sano muddo ku dhow oo la leeyahay xanuunkan safmarka Covid-19 ayaa waxa uu sameeyay isbeddelka ugu weyn xagga dhaqaalaha gudaha ee dalka ayaa isna saameyn gaar ah ku yeeshay xanuunka Covid-19 marka la fiiriyo iyadoo hoos u dhac iyo waliba liidasho hoose oo tan gudaha iyo mid caalamiga uu ku sababay xanuunka Covid-19 Soomaaliya sida warbixinada iyo qiimeynta bangiga adduunka uu ku sheegay haddaba si gaar ah ayaan u eegi doonaa sida barnaamijka markaa aad ku arki doontaan oo kula socon doontaan isbeddelka dhinaca dhaqaalaha iyo waliba Covid-19 saameynta uu ku yeeshay marka la fiiriyo guud ahaanba Soomaaliya iyadoo mas'uuliyiinta barnaamijka ka qayb galayna aragtidiina iyo su'aalihiina aad weydiin doontaan oo jawaabo aad ka heli doontaan sidoo kalena waxaad heli doontaan xog ku saabsan sida markaa loo sameeyay saameynta xanuunkan iyo xagga dhaqaalaha oo bangiga adduunku isugu soo dabriday ninka goobjoog TV kala socon doona labada saac ee soo socota waxaan markale idin xusuusinayaa daawadayaal iyo dhageystayaal aragtidiina iyo su'aalihiina waxaad ku soo qori kartaan baraha bulshada aanu ku leenahay ee goobjoog TV barta Facebook goobjoog ee ku leedahay iyo bankiga adduunka Twitterkiisa ee MBVF1 Somalia loo soo gaabiyo si toos ah ayaad ula socon doontaan u diyaar garooba qaybaha kale ee barnaamijka intaanna u wareejinaa xubnaha bangiga adduunka ee barnaamijka qaybtiisa dambe noo daadihin doona oo su'aalaha noo qaybin doona iyo waliba aragtiyada ka imaanaya dadweynaha iyo mas'uuliyiinta barnaamijka ka qayb galaysa waxaan si gaar ah idinku wareejin doonaa xubnaha halkaasi ku sugan oo istuudiga qaybtiisa kala goobjoog marka barnaamijka inoogu wadi doona barnaamijka intiisa badanna waxa uu ku bixi doonaa luqadaha Englishka iyo afka Soomaaliga iyadoo mas'uuliyiinta qaarna su'aalahiina aad ku weydiin kartaan af Soomaali haddii aad ugu tala gashaan inaad su'aalahiina ku soo weydiisaan Englishna aad ku soo qori kartaan baraha bulshada Twitterka iyo Facebooka iyadoo si toos ah marka loogu gudbin doono isla markaana aad heli doontaan tarjumaad ku aadan su'aalihiina marka mas'uuliyiinta loo gudbinayo qaarkoodna haddii ay ka jawaabaan aad heli doontaan in si af Soomaaliya la idinku soo gudbiyo intaan u gudbin kooxda halka ay noo joogta iyo barnaamijka qaybihiisa kale mar kale daawadayaal ballan la daawada videoga ku saabsan isbeddelka dhinaca dhaqaalaha ee bangiga adduunka uu soo ururiyay goobjoogna aad ka daawanaysa
Thank you, Mohammed Bishop, broadcasting live on Goobjob TV in Mogadishu. Honorable Minister of Finance, Dr. Abdirahman Bayle, World Bank Country Manager for Somalia, Christina Svensson, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the launch of the Somalia Economic Update, Edition 5 on Goobjob TV. The Somalia Economic Update is an annual flagship publication of the World Bank. It explores Somalia's economic performance and offers policy options. My name is Vera Rosauer with the World Bank, and I will be your host for today. For those joining us via WebEx, please use the chat function at the bottom right-hand side to post your questions. We kindly ask you to keep it concise. You can also post your questions on our Twitter handle at MPF1Somalia. I repeat, at MPF1Somalia, at GoopJog TV, and at GoopJog's Facebook page. For all our guests, please mute your microphone until it's your turn to speak. Now, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Somalia had marked several significant milestones. The country reached the debt relief decision point in March 2020, which allowed it to reestablish relations with the World Bank and IMF, amongst others, and to access funds from the international development assistance. Somalia had also instituted reforms in financial and telecommunications sector. The country had increased investments and entrepreneurial activity in urban areas. Last but not least, Somalia also received good dire rains in 2020, resulting in better agricultural productivity. However, the triple shocks of the COVID-19 pandemic, the desert locust invasion, and floods has interrupted Somalia's economic growth focus and resilience. Please join me in welcoming the World Bank Country Manager for Somalia, Ms. Christina Svensson, to make the opening remarks and to contextualize our discussions here today. Christina, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vera. Honorable Minister, it's a true pleasure to be here. This is my first intervention as country manager for Somalia for the World Bank. So it's a real honor to try to start working with all of you. I won't be long, but as Vera mentioned, COVID has impacted, in fact, the whole continent of Africa to a great extent. Perhaps not so much on the health side, but more on the economic side. So we see today, for the first time in 25 years, Sub-Saharan Africa is going into a recession. And that is serious. In Somalia, we had actually expected a larger decline in growth than what has happened. So that is good news. We had predicted, I think, more than a contraction of more than around 5%, and today we actually see a contraction around 1.5% instead. So that is a positive thing, but of course it's not good. So we have seen a shock, a severe shock that has impacted the poor. It has impacted households, it has impacted services, and it has impacted core government functions. We also see increased fiscal pressures and a reduction in revenues for the federal and the central government and the member states. So I also want to take this opportunity to recognize the efforts that have been made by the government, both on the federal and the member state level, to address this crisis. So this fifth edition, like Vera said, of the Somalia Economic Update, it's mainly focused on talking about the economic recovery. And it does that in a way that it focuses on, it's based on real data. So in the end, the report contains three main messages. The first one is that Somalia's healthcare system remains constrained by lack of resources, medical equipment, and staff. Increasing both the budget and the capacity of the sector will be essential to fight the COVID-19 crisis, but it's also a basic precondition for economic recovery. The second message is that the high levels of food insecurity that we see today in Somalia and widespread malnutrition among children. COVID has made the situation worse, as well as the flooding and the locust. And to address this, expanding social safety net programs to cushion the effects of this triple shock that Vera was talking about is extremely important. One way of doing this is to build to the support to the poor through the Bashnano program, and this has been key, and we have seen this in Somalia. Scaling up existing cash transfer schemes to protect the poor and the most vulnerable, including the urban poor, the people living in urban areas, is highly relevant, and it's really, in my mind, and I think in the mind of the World Bank, is really one of the main policy tools that the government all over the continent can use to address the crisis. Finally, the wider reform efforts that Vera as well was talking about, which the HIPC decision point and the debt relief process is part of, it's key to continue that reform path and the reform efforts. So this has enabled the authorities to mobilize additional resources to finance its response to the triple crisis. And we have seen that donor grants have almost doubled to 8.3% of GDP in 2020 as 2020 estimates. So we at the World Bank are proud and very much supporting the government in these efforts. We are committed to providing net positive flows of grants while Somalia works to reach the HIPC completion point, which is the next step in the debt relief process. And again, we are strongly committed to supporting Somalia through this triple crisis, both with these kind of reports, which provides policy advice and ideas and lessons learned from other parts of the world and other parts of the continent, and also with investments. So we have seen since the HIPC decision point that our commitments have increased significantly. And again, we are here to support the authorities and to support them in providing relief to the people of Somalia and to make sure that people are brought out of poverty. So thank you very much for your attention. I give the word back to you, Vera. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Now, before we pivot to the minister and welcome him to speak, I would like to welcome Ismahan Adawe to translate into Somali what Christina has just said. And then, Christina, I will give this back to you to welcome Dr. Bailey. Over to you, Ismahan.
Assalamu alaikum ummadda Soomaaliyeed meel kastoo joogtaan subax wanaagsan waxaan rabaa inaan idin soo koobo hadalkii ay tiri maamulaha cusub bangiga adduunka ee Soomaaliya Madam Christina Svensson waxa ay taabatay goobjoog ahaan waxa waaye xaaladaha waddanka uu soo maray iyo mid hadda Afrika ay ku jirto tan ugu koowaad waxa waaye dhibaatada hadda adduunka wada haysato oo cudurkaani tun safraaga COVID inuu Soomaaliya saameeyay Afrikada dhanna uu saameeyay tan kalena oo jirtana Soomaaliya inay la kulantay dhibaato saddex jibaar ah tan ugu horeysa tahay mid hadda aan sheegay COVID-ka tan labaad ee tahay saameyntii daadeedyada wabiyada ee sameysay oo waddanka inta badan gaartay tan saddexaadna ee tahay ayaxii oo waddanka soo weeraray oo loo kastiga ahaa oo dadkii beeraha falinayay dhibaateeyey sidaas awgeed waddankii dhaqaale ahaan wax yar hoos buu galay laakiin nasiib wanaag sidii la filinayay ma aysan noqonin Soomaaliya waxay muujisay ka hortag oo awoodeeda ah marka ay noqoto xagga isku imaanta dowladda si ay uga hortagto saddexdan dhibaato oo waddanka soo wajahday waxa ay kale ay mahad u sameynaysaa wasiiradaha amniga wasiiradaha maaliyadda siday isugu yimaadeen ay u wada shaqeeyeen si arrintaanaytun ay uga hortagaan Soomaaliya waxaa taagan 3 dhibaatan hadda ta ugu horeysa waxaa waaye midda caafimaadka ah oo xagga caafimaad dowladda oo walba maxay tahay dhinaca tayadeeda caafimaadka uusan fiicneen cudurkan COVID-na uu soo saaray banaanka dhibka jiro wasaaradda waxaa soo wajahay awood shaqo la'aan taayadii dadkii lagu daaweyn lahaa iyo maxay ahaateen iyo ahaan sidii cudurka faafintiisa loo yaraan lahaa tan labaad waxaan kale oo la sameeyey in maxay ahaateen dadkii laga caawiyo dadkii oo arrintaanitun ay saamaysay dadka saboolka ah dadka maxay tahay magaalada banaankeeda degan iyo gobolladaba degan barnaamijkaanaytun baxnaano bangiga adduunka uu bixiyey waxaa waaye barnaamij sii xoogeynayo xoolihii oo xawaaladaha waddanka walba hore ka jiray waa barnaamij dadka Soomaalida ah oo hadda maadaama tooda badan qofood ay dad faqiir ay yihiin waa barnaamij loogu talagalay inuu wax saameeyo oo wax siiyo dadka dhibaataysan waa barnaamij oo lacag siinayo oo dadkana isku dayayo inuu baahida uu ka bixiyo iyo dhibka hadda jiro oo 3 jibaarka ah midda kale oo ugu dambayso oo World Bank uu xooga saarayo waxaa waaye in dowladdii isbeddelkii hore ay u waday inay sii wado in laga caawiyo dowladda wax kasta oo ka hortaga oo xag maaliyadeeda oo ay samayn karto marka inta dhibkaanaytun uu socdo iyo inay dowladda sii wado horumarkii dowladeed oo reformka ahaa ee horey 3 sano oo lasoo dhaafay ay sii waday midda hadalka fiican guul ayaa Soomaaliya ay gaartay Soomaaliya hadda waxa ay la kulantay wax la dhaho tipping point oo ah deen ka bixinta wadamada saboolka ah oo deymaha ku jiro Soomaaliya hadda waxa u bilowday deen cafis taas oo u ogolaanaysa inay Soomaaliya maanta lacag deeqa ah ay ka hesho hay'adaha ay ka mid yihiin AFDB iyo World Bank Soomaaliya go'aan ayuu ka gaaray inuu Soomaaliya caawiyo marka ay noqoto 3 dhibaato oo waddanka hadda taagan World Bank wuxuu bilaabayaa inuu Soomaaliya deeqa siiyo oo ka bixiyo maxay ahaateen dhibaatada hadda jirto lacago badan ayaa hadda la bilaabay oo ay ka mid tahay sidii looga kabsan lahaa dhibaatada hadda jirto lacag oo sii socod ah oo maamulka dowladda lagu caawinayo lacag oo maxay tani looga caawinayo xagga oo loo ayaxan safra lacag looga hortago lacag oo dhinaca caafimaadka laga caawinayo ugu badnaan lacagta ugu badan oo maanta dowladda siin karo ayaa Soomaaliya ayay helaysaa oo ilaa iyo 300 milyan sanadkiiba ah xaqiiqatan waan garab taaganahay Soomaaliya waan la shaqeynaynaa Soomaaliya in maxay tan wadanka horumarkiisana la sii wado dhibaatadan hadda jirto oo saddex geesoodka ahna wadanka laga bixiyo sidaas awgeed waxay dhahaysaa waan ku mahadsantihiin inaan wadanka aan imaaday wadankana aan ka shaqeyn doono assalaamu calaykum waraxmatullaahi wabarakaatu
Thank you very much, Ismahan. I think we do have an acre. Nairobi in 1441. John Ranga, please mute unless you're speaking. Thank you. Now, before we move on to the minister, who I cannot see online, I would like to invite Mr. John Ranga to kick off our presentations, and then we'll pivot back to the minister as soon as she is online. Over to you, Vincent. Over to you, John Ranga. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. My name is John Randa. I am the senior economist in the macroeconomics, trade and investment department. I'm the presenter for the first part of the presentation on the recent economic highlights on Somalia. Now, my main messages for this part are 6 of them, but mainly 3. This is a time for COVID, and as we all know, COVID has caused a lot of economic shock, as Christine has just said. And for Somalia, it's even worse because it comes at a time when floods hit several parts of Somalia, and then there was the issue of desert locust infestation. This actually has caused the economy to contract. Initially in June, we thought the economy was going to contract by 2.5%, but new numbers from looking at the economy, new numbers show us that now it may contract by, it's not as worse as we expected in June. Now the economy will contract by 1.5%, which is still huge because before we thought the economy was going to grow by 3.2%. The reason why we are concerned with this is because so many people will fall into poverty. Remember, almost 70% of the population is poor, and if more people fall in poverty, that will be really unfortunate. And because of floods and desert locust infestations, we see the issues of food insecurity emerging. Overall, in the medium term, we are positive about the outlook, and we think this will be a V-shock, a very sharp fall, but also a very quick recovery. So we expect the economy to rebound in 2021. More details will come later. Now, the triple crisis which I'm talking about is severe floods. As all of us know, that the floods has caused immense damage in several parts of Somalia, in Hirshabelle, in southwest, in Jubaland, and in Puntland. Overall, actually, 17 districts have been affected. 370,000 people have been displaced and left their homes. There have been so much losses in the agriculture, in the riverine areas, and so many roads and so many bridges have been washed off. So that explains why the economy will not grow as we expected. Now, on the locusts, this is a massive threat to the food security and livelihood of most Somalis. The locust is the worst in the last 25 years. 44 districts have been affected. Over 180,000 hectares of rangelands have been infested by these locusts. They're laying eggs along their paths. Now, this is destroying a lot of livelihood for thousands of people. Not only the farmers, so we are talking about agro-pastoralists, and people have been displaced because of this locust infestation. So we expect that the cereal production will go down by 2% in this their season, according to the data we have from the FSNU. According to FAO, we also expect 4.5 million people in Somalia to be at risk of hunger or have faced livelihood losses. Now, to the main pandemic, the global pandemic in COVID-19, all sectors have been affected, and it came at the right time when Somalia has been rebuilding. The health system was unprepared to deal with this crisis. That's why initially we saw a rapid spread of the virus. Since most of the Somalis, because they're poor, because of where they are, most of them are in IDPs, have limited access to this essential service of health. And as you remember, there are very few public hospitals in the country. And as Christina said, it's not only the resources, it's the medical equipment and the staff. Somalia doesn't have enough staff to deal with this. Now, overall, initially what we saw, even though now they have been mitigated a bit, we saw a trade compression, ships were not docking, the supply chains were disrupted. Somalis abroad could not remit their remittances as they expected. And initially, we saw an uptick before the government intervened. We saw an uptick in inflation. And since the economy was not moving, domestic revenues were coming down, and we expected some shortfall. Yet the citizens expected the government to help them. So the spending needs were increasing. So all of this interrupted the growth trajectory for Somalia, which was supposed to grow at 3.2%. Now, and we thought it will grow to 2.5, but as I've said, the new data suggests that the impact may not be as we thought. So the economy now will still contract at 1.5, but we expect a recovery to 2.9 next year, and then the economy will grow at 3.2 in 2022. I will tell you the assumptions under this forecast. And as I said on the right-hand side, as I said, it's not only Somalia, all the economies, their growth path has been affected. So Somalia, it was 3.2 for 2020, now it's 1.5. I have data there for Eritrea, Burundi, Kenya. Kenya will now, instead of 5.7, it will be a positive 1.5. And then we have Ethiopia 6.0, the initial growth, but now is 3.2 in the post-COVID era. Now, as I said, we expected the government had to react given the circumstances. They did a revised budget, which with a domestic revenue shortfall of 1.4% of GDP, around 67 million. However, data which we have show that the economy is doing better than expected. I think it's because of the interventions, which I'll talk about later, which the government has undertaken. Domestic revenue has August reached 80% of the revised budget, which is high than what we expected, but it's still something which we are optimistic about. However, the growth until August, they are 4.8% lower than in 2019. So it's not a doom scenario, but things are trying to pick up. So as I said, the actual collection is around 85% of the original budget of domestic revenue of 200 million. On the expenditure side, expenditures have doubled to around 12.4% of GDP compared to 2019. Intergovernment transfer, how much money leaves the central government going to the federal member states, is 3 times higher than before COVID, and this is because of the support which the central government is giving. So social spending has increased almost 5 times, driven by expenditures in health and social protection. Again, we will show this later. And then another chunk which has absorbed most of this money is cash transfers to the poor through the Baxnano program. The COVID, we might say, is a blessing in disguise because it has given the opportunity for the Somali to deepen fiscal federalism. And there have been, we've never seen so many coordinated Minister of Finance fiscal forum between the FDS and federal member states. So, and this is because they wanted to act collectively the response to COVID. So going forward, I think this heightened the pressure because more money now is going to the states. Now we need to have more pressure to integrate the PFM reforms across jurisdictions. Now, in this chart, I'm just showing you how revenue has performed before COVID and revised budget and the actual what we see until August. As you can see, before COVID, total revenue was expected at 156 million. That was revised in August to 107, but already the actual data was 90%, which means more revenues are coming in than before. And the same, you can see the same with non-tax revenue. One thing which we see here, because of COVID, more money now is coming in as budget support. Pre-COVID, it was 63 million, and now we see almost double, almost triple, actually, about triple at 167 million. And already more money has come, 116 million. Projects are having more money in the revised budget, 243, compared to pre-COVID 169. But so far, 64 million has come in. If you want to know how much the government has done in terms of revenue collection, look at, if you compare month on month since 2016, even though last year was 142 million, we've already achieved 135 million despite COVID and despite all these triple shocks we are talking about. That is something very impressive. If you leave this meeting, I want you to have this slide in your mind. This is one slide I would like you to get off this launch and memorable slide I want you to have. As you can see, intergovernmental fiscal transfers has really gone up, almost threefold, 244% increase from 2019. This is excellent news. Resources now are moving from the center and going to the federal member states. This is really, really impressive. Another slide I want you to go home with is the one on the right, and look at the social spending. It has really gone up from 2019. Look at how much we used to spend on 2019, and look at how much will go to the social sector in this year, the green part. It has really, really gone up, 132%. Really, really impressive. Look at the red one on the economic services, really gone up. This is something, if you've been following the economic updates when we started, very little was going to economic services, very little was going to the social services. Another thing, if you look at administration, the blue part, the bottom one, it is not growing as fast as the green and the yellow. The green, the red, and the green and the red, not growing very fast, which is really, really impressive. It appears the federal government is really reorienting expenditure away from defense and administrative functions into economic and social services. This is really, really impressive. And for me personally, who has worked on Somalia since 2014, this is really impressive. And this is what we've always called for. And we thank the government for this. Now, in other sectors of the economy, we thought that the jobs, many people lost their jobs, many Somalis in the diaspora lost their jobs. So we thought because of their falling incomes, remittances will decline. And we had estimated that around these remittances will decline by 2.5. That is then. But now we are seeing, if you compare the latest data we have, this fall is not as much as we expected. But it's still a little decline, but we are happy for that there was not massive fall. This is important because this has been because 30% of the population depend on remittances. Foreign direct investment data is not there, but we think that the FDI will decline as investors do play the wait and see and the wait and see game. Now, I mentioned this earlier. The government was very responsive when it came to COVID, and a coordination committee led by the Prime Minister was created. Somalia, just like most countries, restricted large meetings and gatherings. Schools and universities were closed. Flights were both domestic and international flights were suspended, and there was a lot of communication through radio, TV, and social media for people to take COVID seriously. And then there was the launch of the country preparedness and response plan by Somali partners and Ministry of Health. The fiscal measures, and this is where we is appropriate to compliment the Minister Bailey for, was that fiscal measures. The government took really responsible fiscal measures to mitigate the impact of COVID. There was a temporary tax relief given to ease the impact of crisis on the households. There were tax exemptions given on staples. For example, the 3-month tax holidays effective from July 15th. Now, businessmen took advantage of this and looked for opportunities to bring food products into Somalia, and that allowed inflation not to go up because the commodities were there in the market. Also, the ministry implemented a 50% reduction in consumption tax for wheat and vegetable oil. And then there was 100% tax exemption on rice and dates. And then the minister also introduced a permanent tax and commodity duty increases on same goods like tobacco, beauty products, and plastic bags. And then we are seeing the economy reopening. Authorities are taking a phased approach. Domestic flights have resumed in July 15th. international flights on August 3rd, and public schools have opened since August 15th. I think the government's efforts were really appropriate given the circumstances, and given that we are seeing, even if you look at the impact of that on revenue and everything, I think they need to be uploaded. Now, all this happened when Somalia reached a real milestone, as Christina has highlighted to. Somalia reached a decision point, and IMF and the World Bank approved their qualification to receive debt relief. All the areas of IFDB, IMF, and the World Bank were cleared, and then now Somalia has reestablished access to concessional funding from the bank side. Around $290 million have come in to address the crisis which Somalia is facing. And then there's been successful talks with the Paris Club and other creditors to engage in this debt restructuring. And then now that Somalia has reached the completion, then in 3 years Somalia will reach a completion point, which will provide an opportunity for all debt to be irrecoverably to be revoked. Now, what is the medium? How do we see the medium term? As I've said, it's a V recovery. We expect the economy to grow by 2.9% in 2021, and then 3.2% in 2022. Now, we are assuming that the assumptions for this growth is that the impact of COVID lasted only for 3 months. For 6 months, that is from May to September, and the economy was going to reopen in the last quarter of 2020. Things have started looking up, and so that assumption seems valid. And then remittances will start flowing, and grants will also start coming. And that is what we see. We are now in the 3rd quarter, and these assumptions, it appears we were right in the first place in June. And then we don't expect any further climatic shocks. And then the spending from the government will go up if the resources of the donors come in, and we are already seeing that. Now, what are the risks in for growth in 2021 and 2022? Now, we expect that the political Somalia is going through an election, and we expect that the election will start in December until March, and we expect that this will go on smoothly, that the economic uncertainty will not arising from the elections will not be there. And then the other risks which we foresee are insecurity, that if this insecurity doesn't worsen the way it is this year. And the other risk which may affect this growth is if the locust infestation worsen. If those 3 things became worse, the issues to do with the elections worsens, the insecurity worsens, and the locust infestation and the climate become bad, then this growth will not be achieved. But we don't, the benefit of hindsight, we don't see this happening. So we expect our baseline growth of 3.2% in 2022 to hold, and 2.9% in 2021 to hold. Now, if things are worse, if this COVID impact, the second wave which we are seeing in other countries, happens, then growth may not be 2.9% in 2021. It might be 1.9%. And it can also be worse if the locust, as we've heard from the neighboring country, Kenya, locusts are still coming in. If that also happens in Somalia, then the 2.9 growth may not be achieved, and we may talk about 1.9. But it will still be a positive growth compared to this year. Now, what policies are we recommending in the short and the medium term? In the short run, we expect that the government will continue enhancing and promoting measures to prevent the worsening of the COVID condition. We expect that the budget for Ministry of Health will increase. We expect that Somalia will continue securing food availability for majority of population and mitigating the price increases as they did during the first wave of the pandemic. And then they will expand the safety net programs, which has really proved valuable for most Somalis. In the medium term, going ahead, we expect that for companies to keep on hiring the youth, the jobs, and there's a very huge youth population in Somalia. If more liquidity and trade financing could be given to SMEs during this time, and if the government continue implementing revenue reforms, which they've done successfully in the last 3 years from the charts, have shown you that the government needs to embed that going ahead to generate more revenue so that Somalis can really finance services and their future given the domestic resources. And then implementing financial reforms, which the Central Bank of Somalia has been doing very well, the ML law, so that more financing can come in from abroad, and then more financing can move from one part of Somalia to the other. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that growth is very important for Somalia. At the moment, the population growth is around 2.9%. If any growth less than 2.9%, which means Somalis are getting worse off in terms of GDP per capita. So we need to find ways, sectors in which the government can invest more, or investors can be encouraged to grow much faster to enhance and increase Somali's growth performance. Thank you very much, Vera. Back to Vera.
Thank you very much, John Randa. John Randa is the World Bank Senior Economist for Somalia. Thank you for walking us through Somalia's macroeconomic outlook. I would also like to take this opportunity to recognize the Minister of Finance, Honorable Dr. Abdirahman Bailey, who has joined us. Welcome, Honorable Minister. We quickly will go through the second part of the report, and I would like to welcome Mr. Matthias Meyer, our Senior Operations Officer, to walk us through Somalia's security sector reforms and the policy options that the World Bank is recommending. And then we'll pivot back to the Minister. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for your patience. Matthias, over to you. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Vera, and I will share some slides from my side. Welcome, Minister, Excellencies, colleagues. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present a somewhat anachronistic special focus during these COVID times. I would like to highlight some of the key reforms that government has undertaken with international support, but with a strong domestic energy to conclude and advance some necessary reforms in the security sector. As you all know, security has imposed high costs on Somalia, mostly on individuals in rural areas, but all across through the disruption of public services, and lack of economic opportunities. The provision of security has also been quite costly and remains to be costly both for the government, where almost half of the FGS wage bill is spent on security, as well as 1/3 of all government expenditures are on the security sector. The international contributions exceed estimates around $1.5 billion, of which half is financing AMISOM. The World Bank got engaged in the security sector based on a request from government to conduct a public expenditure review of the security and justice sector in 2017, together with our partners from the UN. That helped the bank and international partners to understand better the fiscal picture and the institutional capacity to manage resources on systems with regards to the security sector. The strong partnership with the Ministry of Finance is extending some of the PFM reforms that the government has led since 2014, supported by the Multi-Partner Fund and a wide range of international partners in Somalia. These PFM reforms extending to the security sector have indeed delivered on a key recommendations from the World Development Report 2011 and the World Bank's Fragility and Conflict and Violence Strategy passed earlier this year. One of the key pillars to exiting from fragility is an investment in strong accountable institutions and strengthening those institutions as part of an ongoing reform process. The international support to security in Somalia is quite high in resource terms, and it is unlikely that this support will be sustained over the long term. Hence, the request from government to the World Bank to provide additional guidance and analysis around the affordability of the sector in light of competing priorities for government. John has mentioned the strong investments in economic and social dimensions, but also the increased intergovernmental transfer, and now the recovery from COVID. So there are competing priorities, and efficiency and affordability is a guiding principle for investing scarce resources. The government has agreed with international partners on a reform path following the agreement on a national security architecture to deliver security service in a fiscally sustainable and efficient way, to have in the end able, accountable, affordable and acceptable security services in Somalia. The World Bank has supported PFM reforms with the government since 2014, as I mentioned, but have asked the World Bank to extend some of this support with a particular focus on the security sector. And here it's important to note that expenditures in the security sector are highly focused on salaries and rations, which together make up more than 90% of total expenditures in the security sector. So since government decided to focus on those expenditure categories, the World Bank was able to provide analytical and technical support around those. Just to note, 8 out of 10 employees that the government is paying are in the security sector. So the amount of individuals that receive support from government is substantial, and the rations alongside those salary costs are the single largest purchase in the FGS budget. So real big expenditure categories for government. Government has engaged in a biometric registration process to understand better who is serving as part of the security services, what are their biometric data, age, health status, to allow a more data-based decision-making around allocation of resources. Some of those biometric reform processes and the link to the financial management information system in Somalia provide already necessary steps in a more transparent and accountable management of those public resources. The retendering of the rations contracts with support from the Financial Governance Committee have already delivered fiscal savings for government that can then be reinvested in improved service delivery. The reform to central purchasing contracts over the next couple of years, as has been initially undertaken by government, will remain also a key priority, as will be a rationalization of the active payroll in the security sector, alongside a planned pensions reform and other right-sizing options that government is considering. Having said all of these positive statements around the reform energy and the strong track record, one needs to recognize that in all PFM reforms, 10% have been achieved here with the provision of additional documents, clarifying business processing, assessing and registering staff. But the implementation side normally covers 90%, where entrenched behaviors, prioritization within resource allocation, and a sustained model of paying for efficient security sector needs to be undertaken. So the World Bank has worked together with the Ministry of Finance under the leadership of the minister, the vice minister, state minister, and on a technical level with very strong support from DG Suleiman, who is also connected here. The key priorities that government has outlined together with the PFM reform team in government here is to work towards an affordable security sector in the long run. So what are the measures that costs can be controlled, budgets can be executed according to plan, and resources can be used in the way that was envisioned and alongside strategic plans of recruitment and exiting of the forces. The second key point is continue efforts towards systems building. We have, in our experience with general PFM reforms, have realized that it requires sustained handholding, sustained support, and in government to make these reforms reality, to make those reforms part of daily business processes, and ingrain them in the culture of the bureaucracy to manage those resources in this way. This requires the long breath and requires sustained resourcing of those efforts. Thirdly, the internal controls of the public financial management system in the security sector need strengthening. There's a huge reform agenda ahead of strengthening those internal controls that can catch deviations from standard business processes early, can work with the security forces and the civilian oversight institutions to strengthen on a continuous basis the capacity in the sector. It's also important to focus on the financial controls in the security sector. Budget is one major area of control for government. The budget forecast and cash management as secondary steps are relying on a comprehensive view on expected expenditure in the security sector, and purchasing and salary payments need to be aligned with those priorities. The government has committed to continue those reforms, and the World Bank has offered a technical assistance to link the reforms that are envisioned in the security sector to an overall public financial management reform in the security sector. What I describe here is a very small part of the overall security sector reform, with a particular focus on public financial management issues that the World Bank is engaging here. I'm aware that broader security challenges exist that can undermine reform efforts by government. Contextual factors have in the past affected reform speed and sustainability. And the World Bank is focusing on a technical issue here, helping the government to identify opportunities for more affordability in the sector, more efficiency, and more accountability in the sector. I think through very small technical reforms, the government was able to provide a solid foundation on which the coming years and coming reform priorities in the security sector can be built, with a particular reform around public financial management and budget execution. We feel that that foundation has been built and that international support and domestic leadership can make great strides towards a more accountable and efficient security sector in Somalia. Thank you. This is all from my side.
Thank you very much, Matthias Meyer. That's our Senior Operations Officer for World Bank Somalia. I would also like to take this opportunity to recognize the IMF representative for Somalia, Yusuf Shamake, who has joined us. I would also like to recognize the Director General, Mr. Suleiman Umar. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I would like to invite the Honorable Minister of Finance, Dr. Abdirahman Beyle, to give his keynote speech, but to also respond to the presentations that have been made on the fiscal side, as well as the security sector reform. Dr. Beyle, please feel free to also welcome other government senior officials who are joining us here today to give their reactions. Over to you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Everybody from the World Bank side, the IMF, and from our side here from Mogadishu, Minister of Finance, the Central Bank, and the Office of the Prime Minister and the President. We're seeing that they all are here. My sincere apologies for not being able to attend the meeting from the beginning. Problems of internet connections always are not very helpful. But I must say that I have heard most of the report, and I reviewed and read the report as well. This is a very factual report, and we welcome its launching here. We were part of the discussion in the drafting, and therefore we have no serious.
Honorable Minister, I am sorry to interrupt you. We seem to be having a problem hearing you. Perhaps you're muted. Yes, much better. Not as clear, but much better. Please go ahead.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, there's quite a bit of echo though on the background.
I'm sorry, the system here does not seem to be very good. Can I be heard clearly?
Yes, we can hear you, but not clearly. Perhaps your technical team can look at your microphone.
Okay.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for bearing with us. We seem to be having a technical problem. This has become the new norm lately. So I ask for your patience as we sort this out. As we wait for Dr. Bailey to join us, perhaps I could go ahead and ask a few questions for the presenters to respond to. And this is a question for our senior economist, Mr. John Randa. What has been the impact of COVID-19 on remittances? John, over to you if you can take that. John Randa. Okay.
Am I muted? Can I hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Initially, what we thought the remittances were going down. We don't have live numbers now, but the numbers we have are until August, which show that if you compare August numbers with the previous 2019 August, numbers were almost similar, but slightly on the lower side. It's not by 25% down, which we thought. But during the peak months of April and May, the numbers were down. But the actual numbers are not live, and there's not much we can say about them. But they have not fallen the way we thought we had initially predicted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I have another question for you coming to us from a stakeholder living in Uganda, and they do ask, how can the World Bank help Somalia's economy grow? John, perhaps you can take that.
I think it's the same way. For us, we don't make the World Bank doesn't make Somali grow. It's the policies of the government which makes Somali grow. Us is to support the government in their plan to make Somali grow. They already have a blueprint, the National Development Plan, which lays the growth path on which sectors, on what needs to be done Somali grow. And they've identified so many sectors for which, if reforms are undertaken, then investments coming through the private sector and through the public, then the economy will grow. Ours is to provide support on the government the policies which the government put in place for the economy to grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just would like to check in with Honorable Minister Dr. Bailey. Are you able to join us, or should we give you a few more minutes?
I'm going to try. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Thank you very much. Please go ahead. You are muted now. I could hear you previously very clearly. May I suggest that you use your earphones? It will minimize the echo.
Because
Yeah, let's try this and see if it works.
Okay, can you hear me?
Perfectly. Please take it away.
Okay. So I'm very sorry that I was not able to join you in the beginning. Very well. I have read the report, and we were part of the preparation in the beginning, and really we appreciate the content of this document and the factual information available here. I think it will be basis for us moving forward. We very much welcome the information here and the analysis made. We welcome the risks foreseen and the support given to us by the international community, leader among them the World Bank, and therefore World Bank and the IMF. Let me just say that as I heard the discussion, the facts have been highlighted of the risks that can be seen, and that elections are some of them, risks that may emanate from the elections, and the response by the international community to the risks of the elections, the attitude or the inclination to wait and see. I think we have done a lot of good things together, moving this country from a very far place to where we are today, very, very positive in every aspect. The COVID-19, while it was not as bad as we initially expected or foreseen, it's still affecting the economy, and it's affecting the revenue, the domestic revenue. We really survived with the support of the World Bank and the African Development Bank, to say the least. We are really going through difficult times at this particular point in time, as the international community, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and the EU, who were the source of support by way of budget support, are now waiting a bit for the result of the elections. I would simply say that we have all the information here. The World Bank and the international community have all the information in Somalia, and I think we have succeeded to be very transparent with each other on what needs to be done and what we have done, and the facts and the factors that take Somalia and brought Somalia to where it was. I think I will caution the temptation to let the guard down, the temptation to wait until elections take place. My intention and the intention of the government is that we protect the economy from being affected negatively by any political movements and elections and all that. We are ready and we are committed, the Prime Minister, the President, myself, and everybody, that we continue increasing the revenue, the domestic revenue. But domestic revenue, being what it is, alone may not be enough, and may not be enough for the foreseeable months and perhaps years. We have heard the discussion on the security and the expensive activities being carried out on our budget by the security. I would therefore encourage really the international community to continue to show the commitment, both multilateral and bilateral, so we don't regress. I'm very pleased to note the growth prospect, that it will increase from -2.5 to +2.9 next year, and that's very positive outlook. But I think if we continue to say wait and see until the elections take place, we may go down, and it will be difficult for us to come back. I just want us to keep that in mind. On our side, we are working very closely with Natasha and her team, and Christina and all that, and we'll be happy to do whatever needs to be done on our side. We will not let our guard down, and I'm expecting likewise from the international community. I thank you very, very much. This was a great report. Thank you very much. I will try and make a presentation to the cabinet, the highlights of this report. I think it will be very, very useful. This is good information, and I will share with the Prime Minister and also the cabinet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bailey, and thanks very much for making the time to join us here today. I was wondering if you have other senior government officials with you who you would like to invite to make some reactions to the presentations that have been made here today.
Of course, we have a number of people here, the senior staff of the Ministry of Finance. They are welcome if they want to make any comments. Director General Suleiman Omar is here. Jaffa, Director General of Revenue. I think both of them were very much involved. Abdel Nasser Warsama is here, in charge of the planning of the ministry. And so any one of you is welcome to make any remarks, particularly as you are working closely with the team that prepared the document. So I welcome anybody to make any remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I may, thank you, Excellency. Thank you for the World Bank to preparing this vital document, which touches many parts of the Somali economic and also the sector. I would like to make a few comments on the security sector. The bank is working with us on analyzing, and they guide us how we can at least come up at least a viable solution for at least look at and analyze the cost of the security sector, and it was a tangible support. Somalia, the federal government of Somalia tried to at least to make a reform. We started the time that it was difficult for it to start reforming for the security sector of Somalia. No one can dare even to touch that area. I think that thanks to the leadership, we try to do our best, and we, with the support of all government institutions, we at least biometrically registered for all security sector. But only for registered security sector and at least have a data, and it was not enough. But what we needed was at least to deep down on the reform and at least make analysis on what kind of reforms that we are going after the biometric registration. The bank worked with us in analyzing of the patient issue and the patient appeal, which is still waiting the assentation of the president. And I think now what we seek from the bank is that even to strengthen the support that they are giving us in the reform of security sector, not only for the federal, but also for the federal member states. Because Somalia is a one country. If we reform only for the federal side and the federal member states are not reforming, I think it is not a wise judgment. The other hand is that the patient bill that the bank assisted us in at least analyzing and looking at the affordability and at least the cost analysis. It's we need also that support to be continued. The government is committed to continue the reforms, but at least I think we need a more technical assistance from the bank when it comes to security reform. Our best now still making a reform, but you know, they all even in the report has mentioned that the half of the domestic revenue, I think, will be spent on security sector. And then if we spend that much of money of domestic revenue without reforming, I think the cost will go up, and I think we will end up in a place that we cannot even pay run the government institutions. So we need at least to have a rigorous reform on security sector, and we seek the bank to support us in that area. So that's my remarks, and thank you for listening. Over.
Thank you very much, Director Suleiman. Any other reaction from the government? Okay. If there are no further reactions to the presentations, I would really like to encourage everybody to use the chat function on the bottom right-hand side of the WebEx app to drop your questions. and we will be sure to take them. Now, I have a number of questions here. I will ask two at a time and pivot them to the right person. The first one is for you, Honorable Dr. Bailey. What is the roadmap for Somalia currency so that Somalia will have direct control of its monetary policy? And the second question goes to Natasha Sharma, our senior economist. There are conditions Somali has to meet before the 2023 milestone year for Somalia's debt relief. Due to COVID-19, some of these will be missed in the coming years. Will international financial institutions consider relaxing deadlines for these conditions? We'll start with you, Dr. Bailey. Over. I think we lost Dr. Bailey. Natasha,
Yes.
maybe you can.
Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you very much. I think the question is about the Somali shilling currency and when that will come to be. It is in our agenda, a very short-term agenda. As everybody knows, we have been working very closely with the institutions, World Bank and the IMF, to put in place all the conditionalities for printing of a new currency, at least the first version of it. And we have agreed that the first version can cost a certain amount. We have been trying to get the total amount cost in place, and I really think that now we are in a point where we can think about the timing short term. There is some money put aside by the World Bank, and there are also other funds, and you can confirm that if you have that information, the World Bank side, and also some small amounts that are coming from different countries and different institutions. And I think it's about time, maybe within the next few weeks, that we put together what we have as far as the money is concerned. And then we will start the process with the assistance, technical assistance from the IMF. So we are very keen, and we are looking forward to engaging that very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Natasha, if you could take that question, and I'd also like to ask Christina to weigh in on the debt relief question as well. Natasha, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vera. I hope that you can hear me well.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So thank you very much for the question. I would like to just perhaps go back to what we mean by debt relief and to acknowledge the progress that Somalia has made and how we will continue to support Somalia through the process. So in March 2020, Somalia reached the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Debt Relief Initiative decision point. And this means that the international community, based on Somalia's strong track record of reforms, was able to formally re-engage. And at this point, Somalia's arrears to the international financial institutions were cleared. Now, what we have with the HIPIC process, so this Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative process, is we have something which is called a decision point. That's the point of arrears clearance. And then we have something which is called a completion point. So we give a country, any country which goes through this program, a period of time to consolidate reforms, to implement their poverty reduction strategy, which in Somalia is called the 9th National Development Plan, and to implement some key reforms. And the reason we do this is because once a country goes through debt relief, we want to be sure that as a country has access to new types of resources, that they're not going to immediately fall back into debt distress. It's a way of continuing the support on a gradual basis. So in Somalia's case, we have a set of reforms that the authorities are fully behind supporting. And these are called completion point triggers. So once all of these reforms have been completed, and once Somalia has implemented its poverty reduction strategy paper, so the 9th National Development Plan, for at least 1 year, we can say that Somalia is at completion point. But because we know that countries have challenges, things can happen, there may be shocks, there may be other circumstances which are beyond the control of policymakers, we actually don't have a hard deadline here. So we move at the country's pace. That's why we call these floating triggers. But we very much encourage countries to continue with the good progress. And I'm pleased to share that in Somalia, we have not been disappointed. We have a number of reform areas such as anti-corruption, domestic resource mobilization, promoting growth and structural reforms such as in the energy sector, or getting the enabling environment right for the private sector. And in all of these areas, we see that Somalia has continued to make progress, despite all of the challenges which my colleague John Randa made at the start of this presentation. So just to say that there is not a hard deadline, Somalia is in the HIPC process and we are still seeing good progress. I hope that helps to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natasha, for that very detailed and well articulated response. Thank you. Christina, would you like to also weigh in on this?
Sorry, thank you, Vera. Not just to repeat what Natasha was saying, that we are very pleased with Somalia's progress, and again, despite all the challenges that the country is facing, coming in new to this position, it's really gratifying and positive to see the efforts that everyone is making all around the table. So just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I have 2 more questions here. I would like to request Dr. Bailey and Christina to respond to this one. How can the World Bank and the Somali government increase support in job creation for youth and women? And then our second question here should also go to Christina and Matthias. How does climatic shock and climate change affect security sector reform? Does the World Bank support the security sector in factoring in conflicts caused by the environment? And this is from Mohammed Ismail in Puntland. So over to you, Dr. Bailey.
I don't think I heard the first question. Can you please repeat it? The internet was not very straight.
Most certainly.
First one.
Make sure that you can. So yes, how can the World Bank and Somalia's government increase support in job creation for youth and women?
Yes, job creation and it's a very, very, very important question. And as we are preparing the budget for 2021, that's the main question that we are asking. What is in it for the youth unemployed and people unemployed in the budget we are preparing and sending it to the parliament? And I think the idea is that we have come a long way and we are covering most of the cost of those who are already employed. As you know, when we came, 5,000 or so employees were not paid. So we have succeeded to pay that. And we have succeeded to pay for the first time 36 months continuously. And we have no intention of not covering that. So we have done that. We have also been able to pay transparently the security forces, which is also a very big chunk of the budget that we have. Your expenditure, of course, people have to understand, your expenditure is controlled and guided by your revenues. The revenue that we have is 3 parts: domestic revenue, budget support, domestic revenue, and what comes from outside. And what comes from outside, two components. One is investment by projects like the Bahnano and Biole and all those good projects. And the other part is covering the gap in the budget itself, the DPOs. And the DPOs are covering part of the operating cost, so the World Bank and the EU were the most contributors to help us cover that. Now, having said all that, we are trying to do everything possible to create some jobs together with the contribution from the World Bank. But I think most importantly, we have to create important environment for private sector to thrive. And so private sector is the one that should be given the opportunity to create jobs. That is one very important element. By encouraging, by creating the facilitation for the private sector to thrive, and security is part of it. Whatever we invest in the security will increase and enhance the opportunity for the private sector to thrive. Number two, where the World Bank and everybody else is increasing investment in the rural, in different sectors, the health sector, the education sector, the infrastructure. Those will also contribute to creating more jobs. Of course, we are constrained, but at the same time, we have to do our best, and that is always on our radar. It's always on our focus that our economy has to be growing, and that growth has to trickle down to people to get jobs. So thank you very much. That's what I wanted to say. Hope that helps.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Bello. Christina, would you like to come in? If not, we can go to the second one.
Sure. Yes, no, I mean, I very much agree with Dr. Bailey, with the minister, about the need to attract and the need to create business enabling environment and to support businesses, and that these jobs will come from the private sector. I wanted to mention two more things that I think are important. One is to be slightly forward-looking and look at which sectors going forward has the potential to create jobs and has the potential to create quality jobs. So a number of sectors in Somalia are growing. For example, fisheries, and there's potential for potentially down the line for jobs in the service sector, providing support to the petroleum sector. So it's important to have this forward-looking kind of thinking, while we also recognize that a lot of information today is missing in Somalia. So we also have work to do to look at how much each sector contributes to the economy today. Another thing that we know is important for job creation is to keep, and that Somalia is really a front runner already today, is in the digital space. So we know that the better internet you have, the more people that have access to internet, the more that actually impacts job creation and productivity. So we have seen these patterns all over the continent. So really focusing on continuing to develop the digital sector in Somalia, I think is really important. And then finally, just Dr. Bailey as well, he mentioned the need to build skills among the youth. So that can also come from having a better idea of where the opportunities may lie in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. I have another question here that I'd mentioned earlier, but I'll repeat it. How does climatic shock and climate change affect the security sector reform? Does the World Bank support the security sector in factoring conflict on the environment, the impacts of conflicts on the environment? This is a question from Putman, and I'd like to welcome Honorable Minister Dr. Bailey and Matthias Smile to respond to this. Over to you, Dr. Bailey.
Yes, it is again a very important question. The climatic changes have affected Somalia in more than one way. If it's too much rain, there is the floods. And if there is a drought, there is the poverty and the problems that food insecurity brings. And therefore, in both cases, we have a problem. In Somalia, it's always said that 1 year in every 3 years, floods create havoc in the country. And once every 3 years, the drought kills a lot of people. And therefore, and the year in between is a recovery, always a recovery. You are recovering. Now, as you recover, one or the other comes in and it creates a lot of problems. So really, as we think about investing in the country, this is what we are trying to prioritize to stabilize the environment, And if there, for example, work on the banks of the rivers so they don't overrun communities and they don't destroy plantations and they don't wash out communities and people. And therefore, this is really, we have projects coming from the World Bank and also from the African Development MSA addressing those things. The floods, a lot of money is being spent on the floods and flood control. And of course, poverty reduction is, most of the projects are poverty reduction by way of producing more food, by way of doing the storages and the food chain development, by way of developing the rural roads and access roads for the farmers to the markets. And so, the demand is very high for what we get. Demand is very high for what we need. For a country to develop, the country has to get a lot of money from within, and that is very, very small that we are getting. International community can only chip in. International community should not be the driving force of the budget. And that is what Somalis have to understand. They have to mobilize their own resources, be it the state or the federal government. And we have to leave no more than 10% of the investment coming from elsewhere. Even the investment, we have to put some money. So really, it is a major issue. It's a major issue. It's a major issue for every country, but it is one of the main issues here in Somalia as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. And Matthias, over to you.
Thank you, Vera. There's nothing I can add to the excellent explanation that Dr. Bailey has just provided, just reinforcing that the bank remains a partner of the reform efforts of the government, and we look forward to continue that support also in the security sector, public finance reforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. I think we have one last question here. Over 1,000 individuals scattered all over Somalia were asked by the Ministry of Finance, and it's I'm sorry. Okay, so the question here is, the Somalia public would like to know how international financial institutions rate the Ministry of Finance and its teams. That's an interesting question right there. Christina, perhaps you want to go over our partnership with the government of Somalia.
Yeah, perhaps first to say that we don't rate the ministers of finance. We're very happy and honored to have the minister and the ministers of the Ministry of Finance that we have been working with and really have a very good and strong partnership with them for now. But there's no rating. I should say that we have a country partnership framework that was adopted in 2018, and that will go. It's a 4-year partnership, and it will go until the end of 2021, if I'm correct. And that basically, it's a public document, and that basically sets out how we will support the government of Somalia and the priorities that they have set for their reform. And I should also say that IDA, the International Development Association, provides, they have a 3-year cycle of funds. And that cycle, IDA 19, just got started. And Somalia has access to and is eligible for several windows and much more financing than before, obviously, because before they were not eligible because of the debt and the arrears. So we are committed to supporting Somalia, and we are very happy to be working with them along the lines of this country partnership framework. Thank you.
Can I come in? Can I come in?
Yes.
I'm not too sure I understood the question, but I want to share with my Somali colleagues asking questions. Is that it is everybody's responsibility to develop their own countries and be forever grateful for anybody to extend the hand of support. We owe a lot of money that we borrowed. You borrow money, you pay it back. That is the international norm of how things are done. I am talking to my colleagues, the Somalis. We had to pay this money back. We couldn't pay it, and therefore the international community said, okay, you cannot pay, do X, Y, and Z, which is good for your economy, and then we will consider forgiving you all this debt, erasing the debt. And for that, we all have to be very thankful. The second issue is this country has to develop. And that development has to come from within, not from outside, from within. You cannot be dreaming to recruit a lot of people and for somebody else to pay for it. It is not possible. It is impossible to do that. And therefore, it is maybe the moral responsibility of the international community to capacity build us, to capacitate us. We can always say that we have not been going to school, therefore we don't know how to do X, Y, and Z. It's skill formation for us to develop our own resources, and human is the biggest resource that anybody can have, any country can have, human resources. That is what develops all the other resources. So international community is obligated by the international humanity and moral, what do you call, to assist us in doing that. But otherwise, it is us, the Somalis, that have to sit down together and mobilize our resources and finance our budget, not other people, not other. It is very important that we understand that. We cannot sit here all the time and say, what is that institution is doing for us? What is that other institutions doing? They don't owe you anything. I'm talking to my colleagues, so nobody owes you anything. You develop your country and seek very good and intermediary assistance from the international community. That is what we have to all understand. And thank you very much. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I have 2 more questions coming in for you. We are getting quite a bit of chatter within the WebEx chat forum here. Do we have timelines for the currency launch? And the second question is, what's the progress in enacting anti-money laundering FTC to help support normalization of corresponding banking relationships? So over to you, Dr.
Okay, thank you very much. The timeline for the currency is, there is no specific date. I think we are still discussing mobilizing the resources, the cost of printing money and storing money and distributing money and the security that goes with all that. We are working closely with the World Bank, which is taking the responsibility of overseeing the mobilization of resources, kind enough to oversee that. The IMF is also playing a major role. So I think within the next few weeks, we intend to come together and finalize and find time. On the MLF, the money laundering is another big problem for us. Know your customer is another problem for us. We have multiplicity of problems, and our capacity to deal directly with each one of these is very limited. We are now working on the digital ID and the creation of digital ID. It all boils down to that everybody, every Somali should have a unique ID, so you don't duplicate yourself. Here you have one name, the other one you have another name, and then another name. It doesn't work anywhere else in the world except here. So what we are all putting emphasis on is to have a unique ID for everybody. Everybody's iris should be taken, and everybody will have one single ID. So when you deposit money in bank A, you cannot take another name and deposit elsewhere. You are known uniquely, that is you that have done this. And that is really the bottom line. It is not an easy thing, given the Somali culture of, people don't like to be identified. They don't like to be counted. They have cultures that are against that. But you either accept it or you fade away as a country. You fade away totally as a country. You cannot have many names. You cannot have many faces. You can have one name and one face, and that is it. Just like we did for the transfer of funds for salaries, just like we did. So everybody will have one name and one single name. And when you do business, you register yourself as one person with one set of eyes and nothing else. You cannot have multiplicity of eyes. So that is really what we are seeking, the support of the international community. And very soon that is going to be done. Complicated, but we are committed to do that. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Warsame. Yes, a comment from the Minister of Finance.
Go ahead.
I'm Mr. Abdinasir Warsame, Minister of Finance, Economic Policy and Planning Director. It was difficult. I used it for the YouTube, unfortunately. So my comments for the John and Natasha. So the current data collection, as you know, the COVID-19 impact, the long-term implication on our economy and NDP 9, and hopefully maybe NDP 10 will be unaffected for that. So the sources of the data in Somalia, especially for the COVID mitigation measures regarding for import duty exemptions, recurrent cost appropriation, such as employees and something like this, food production and social safety. All the data related for that in our country for the depending on 2020-2025 NDP 9 is a statistical strengthening program funded by the World Bank. Can you tell us, the updating title on the coming economic update 2021 to get for the strengthening for the statistical strengthening program, because it is very difficult for taking the primary and secondary data for the all institutions. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warsame, and previously Dr. Bella for your response. Natasha and John, do you want to come in on that? And then I will ask one last question, and we will then close the meeting. Over to you, Natasha and John.
I didn't hear the question properly. He kept on breaking, so I couldn't figure out the specific question which Abdul Nasir wanted answered. Abdul Nasir, do you want to go again? Just shorten it.
Yes, our project for statistical strengthening program for the long term, the COVID impacted data collection sources is very important for the COVID mitigation. So how can we make the COVID long-term impact data on NDP 9 and NDP 10 for the future? And the topic of Economic World Bank Economic Update 2021. Can we make that?
Yes, I can answer that. Then Natasha can back me up if she has anything to add. Somalia received 25 million to support statistics and to support economic planning through the National Economic Council. Somalians now will, for the first time, will have an opportunity to collect their own data. They are doing their own surveys to do this. You have Somali National Bureau of Statistics now, who is responsible for collecting all the data. For us, so we'll use the data which is being published by the Somalia National Bureau of Statistics. And you're working very closely with Shamake on this. For the next topic of Economic Update 6, internally, we're having discussion to have the health sector as a special focus. So it will have some data or some analysis on how COVID might have affected the economy and what measures need to be undertaken to do that. But we are soon having a discussion on that, so I can't comment fully on how it will pan out. We are working with our health sector colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Now to our last question, and I'd like to pivot this to Dr. Bailey and Christina. How can the World Bank and the government of Somalia support Somalia's citizens in better understanding the complex processes within debt relief? How do they understand how this affects them at an individual and community level? And this has been asked by Fatima and Kismail. Over to you, Dr. Bailey and Christina, and then we'll close.
Okay, it's again a very important question. We have to, first of all, I think, distribute this report to everywhere. I think this report and many other reports talk about debt, the debt and the sources of the debt and what we did with the debt. The debt was about 5.3 billion in arrears, some in arrears, some are not. But all that debt, I think people are yearning to know what we spend the money for. And I am asked it many times, what is this money? Where did it go? Was it stolen? These are legitimate questions. So I thought I had my adequate time in my meet with your minister days, end of the month, every month, that I try to explain, but they are complicated. So distribution of documents will be good, including this report, and perhaps I should, in my meeting with the public, explain more. If Somalis think that they don't have enough information, it gives us the reason for us to go and explain. So we shall do that. Just to say that we have the roots are very well known of all the debt. That the documentations are there. They are all loans given to us, no grants. And these loans were all projects, and the project sites are known, and what was done is known, and the reports are there. It is just that we have done a lot of other things other than developing the country, and therefore whatever road we were trying to build has been destroyed, but the money is still there. We still have to repay the money. Sometimes people say whether the money was all dispersed or not, whether it was dispersed into that particular project or not. But all that doesn't matter, because we are now asking the international community to forgive us. And they found in their hearts that they will do that through the HIPIC process. So now what we have to do now is to follow that road charted by the HIPIC initiative. We are getting there. We are getting there together. This money will be all forgiven if we reach the completion point in the next 2-3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bailey. Christina, any other thoughts on this?
No, I think Dr. Bailey said it so well. I think it's if there's anything we can do to help explain, and I think it's a very good question as well. So if there's any information that you need from us or that we can help you do that, I think that it is a very important question. The only thing I wanted to say was that just for the audience as well to understand that today, because of Somalia's still high debt distress, the funds that we are providing today are 100% grant. So the roads that we are building or that we are supporting the government to finance, or the projects, the social safety net projects, which does touch upon a lot of citizens and the poor, really the poor and vulnerable, most vulnerable populations in Somalia. All of that is grants, so they are not new loans that the country is taking on. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. I think we are coming to the close of our meeting. So I'd like to ask you, Christina, to make the closing remarks and to thank our clients, the government of Somalia, and then we can close and hand over to Good Job TV and Mogadishu. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you, Vera, and thank you, Minister, and distinguished gentlemen and ladies. It's been a true pleasure to participate in this launch. It's my first launch. I hope it's not the last. And I'm looking forward to next year, and hopefully we can kind of recap and see where we were today in the middle of the COVID crisis, and see that we have started the road to recovery when we meet next year. We are here to support the government of Somalia and the people of Somalia, and I look forward to getting to know all of you better, and I'm looking forward to the coming year and to meet all of you here again, if not before. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Bailey.
Okay. Let me just thank everybody here on my side. I want to thank Christina and Vera and everybody else, the team that so tirelessly working for Somalia. I want to thank you all for what you do and what you are doing for us. I want to also take this opportunity to thank the Somali business people and taxpayers. They really brought us from a very deep end to where we are today. I mean, the revenue has doubled and then doubled, the domestic revenue. And so really, I cannot miss that opportunity. I also want to thank the Somali diaspora continuously chipping into this country by way of remittances wherever they are. And I hope that their offsprings who have less connections with Somalia, who are born elsewhere, will continue that tradition of continue sending money to Somalia. Finally, I want to send the people who hold this country together, and that is the Somali women. I want to thank them for the job they do. When we men go out and fight and we have guns and all that, it is the Somali women truly that keep the family together. And so I cannot miss that opportunity to also thank them. So thank you very much, Vera and Christina and everybody else. Thank you, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bailey. What a wonderful note to reach to end our meeting. Women make the world go round. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our broadcast. Thank you all for making time to join us. Thank you, Good Job TV, for hosting us live. Please remember to follow us and continue the conversation on Twitter at MPF1 Somalia. If we didn't get to your question, we can get back to you bilaterally. I am Vera Rosawa. I've been broadcasting live from Nairobi, Kenya. Over to you, Mohammed Bishar at Job TV in Mogadishu. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. That
Thank
was
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
our specialist Vera. guud ahaana barnaamijkii aad ka daawanayseen kana dhageysanayseen raadiyaha iyo telefishinka goobjoog daawadayaal iyo dhegeystayaaliinta ayaanu ku ekeenaynaa waxaa barnaamijka ka qayb qaadanaya sidii aad la socoteenba wasiirka maaliyadda xukuumadda Soomaaliya Dr. Bayle iyo madaxa maamulaha bangiga adduunka ee Soomaaliya Christine Sasson iyo mas'uuliyiin kale oo ka tirsan bangiga adduunka waxaana lagu soo bandhigay aadna looga hadlayay warbixinta sanadlaha ah ee bangiga adduunka ee sanadka 2020 Soomaaliya uu ka sameeyay ku aadan isbeddelka dhinaca dhaqaalaha iyo saameynta COVID-19 kaasoo 5 sano ugu dambeysay bangiga adduunka uu sameeyay aad baad u mahadsantihiin dhammaantiin intaan mar kale kulmi doono anigoo Maxamed Bishaar oo idin leh sidaas iyo nabadgelyo